Hello everyone, welcome to the Kevin Lee Show. Thank you for coming on. This is an 8-part series that I will be releasing every week on Monday at 5 p.m. Australian Eastern Standard Time. The preface for this interview is based around a primary question that I learned from Tony Robbins attending his business mastery event in Amsterdam. And it is based around, if your core business was completely disrupted tomorrow, what would you do? How would you pivot or innovate? And during this time of the recording, we're going through the COVID pandemic. And so I thought it was very fitting interviewing people from around the world in different industries to see how they've pivoted and innovated in their struggling industries. And so the idea is to inspire and encourage people who need it. And so I hope everyone can learn a few lessons from these experts. I hope you enjoy the show. Thank you. Today, we have Will de Beaurepaire. He is part of a family-owned business called the Beaurepaire Wines. From the first vine planting in 1998, their family's singles estate vineyard has grown into a renowned multi-generational boutique producer of French-style wines. Home of Winestate Magazine's 2018 Australian Wine of the Year, they are located on the hills above the historic village of Rylstone, an area they were drawn to for its similarity to the Burgundian Terroir of their French heritage. Everyone, please help me welcome Will. Hey Will, how are you doing today?
Very well, thanks Kevin. It's great to see you. Obviously a little bit colder up here than down in Sydney, but it is always nice to catch up with you.
Thank you so much for coming on. I know you're a busy man and you just got back into Rylstone. I really do appreciate the time you've taken out for this.
Always a pleasure. The one thing I love to talk about is wine, so I'll talk underwater if I had the chance.
All right, let's talk wine. De Beaurepaire is a family-owned business established in the 90s by your parents. Was it a natural love and progression for you, William, to join the business and take over responsibility for wine production? And if you could share your first memories of falling in love with wine.
Look, for me to work in the wine industry was definitely an area that I've been doing a lot of for the last 20 years, and for a lot of the bigger companies out there in particular, what was South Corp, now called Treasury, and McWilliams, and some work with Miranda. But more recently, so obviously joining the family business, probably the last 4 years. My parents established in 1998. It was at that stage an unsure venture. My parents have a great love for making wine and wanted to make some great wine. It's one of those industries where you start out and you hope that the end product is a great product, but there's no guarantee, unfortunately. And also the industry was then pretty beset by, at that stage, a pretty terrible situation. It was called the Grape Glut. We started out mainly as a grape grower, especially for the first 15 years of our company's life. And so grape gluts meant oversupply, meant not a lot of money. There really wasn't a lot of roles, and I probably didn't visualise myself within the organisation for a lot of that time. But visualise myself very much the wine industry. In the last sort of 5 years, at winery, we started to establish, I guess, a confidence in our style of wine production. We started to win some accolades. I think one was best wine in Australia, sort of tends to help. There's definitely become a company that's expanded, and we've started now getting into a scale where there was the opportunity for not just me to join, but my sister Amanda as well. So though I may be responsible for wine and wine production and also the sales of that wine, she's very much responsible for the retail side of the business, so wine clubs, cellar doors, back-end operations. And over time, I'll also take over the vineyard. But as my father sort of says, he plans or intends to die out there in the vines and just to be left there. So we've hopefully got many, many, many years to go before either of us take over. But from a natural progression, this was, I guess it's a dream to be able to work in the wine industry for all its stresses and horrors. And it's not an easy industry. We'll talk about that, I guess, a little bit later. But it's an industry which you can also love. So I guess it's like the great romances. There's high points and there's low points. And without either, you don't appreciate the other. So first, memories of wine. Obviously, a family being Burgundian originally, and my father's family and various people around. It's always been a consumption of wine in the family and an appreciation of it. I've always seen it being consumed at the tables. But like anyone who's younger, wine can be fairly acidic. It's almost sour for a first drinker. So, it takes a while for your palate to really get to that appreciation level for wine. So it's more, I guess, what was my first love around the wine lifestyle. And it would have been, I guess, one of those trips back to Burgundy back in the mid-90s. And, wine is, it's a cultural activity in France and a lot of the old world. It's not an alcoholic beverage. People don't head out to just knock over 3 bottles of wine. It's associated with sense of place and the food that you're having while you're there and the friends that you're with, and it's much more involved. And I think seeing it in that environment, walking through vineyards that have been planted over 1,000, the vines have been replaced and changed over the years, but the actual vineyard locations over thousands of years, and they've each got stories to tell. And me, I'll get to it as well, one of my great loves is history, and wine is an incredible, it's a historical record, effectively, of a lot of cultures all around the world. Everywhere makes a wine or an alcoholic beverage of some sort, from cherry wine to grape wine in the West. Well, hopefully that was my first love.
I love that you said wine is a cultural activity, not an alcoholic beverage. And what you've mentioned before about the vineyards have been around for thousands of years and each has their own story. And I'm sure we'll get into more of the details about it a bit later.
Absolutely.
But I'm very curious, in a very competitive industry, how did you not only stand out from the crowd to not only win the Australian Wine of the Year, but you also stocked Australia's top restaurants, premium hotels, and iconic bars? How did all that come about, Will?
I'd love to say it was easy. The reality of wine is in Australia alone, there's 2,500 wineries. There's probably over 10,000 actual wines in Australia alone. You've add in umpteen multiples of that for the rest of the world. It's a saturated industry. I think the biggest brand in the world of wine is called Ernst & Julio Gallo. It's an American company, and it is about 0.5% of the world's wine. So there are ways, and there are many different pathways to success in the wine industry. Ours was very much a focus on terroir, on that sense of place. So, and I guess what we've tried to do, and I'll go into a little bit, is capture that sense of place and be truthful to what it's telling us. Not trying to create wine that is trying to please people. It's got to be made to a higher quality, but you've got to be unique. And 2,500 wineries, if you're trying to mimic something that's already out there, it's very hard, and you're going to end up competing on price, which is the death knell in our industry. We've got a very consolidated retail space. Not only we've got huge fragmentation at the supply side, at the retail side, the bottle shop side, it's all owned by Coles and Woolworths. And if you've ever dealt with supply to them, they're ruthless when it comes to price negotiation. And now it's even worse than that. They want to replace you with home brand. A lot of the shelves are now stocked with non-wine company brands, their own brands. They make their own wine and they make it look like a wine. So yeah, so why we did it was in Australia, the history of winemaking in Australia was English, so Italian and German. Effectively, that's the three, I guess, main foundation stones. The English being the first here, they have an affinity with wine production, and Bordeaux in particular. They were one of the main markets for a long time for French wine. It was one of the main sources of government tax income was on the wine industry. So they've always loved it, but let's be honest, they weren't vignerons themselves as much. So they planted vines here in Australia where they owned land. And you had people like Busby and Hunt Valley and various other, he was the first. And they may not have been the most appropriate locations for those varieties that they're placing. They didn't really look around and go, this valley reminds me of the Rhone Valley. It was, I own this land, I'm going to plant some grapes, was on and make some wine. So that was one approach. The Germans were probably the more focused on a sense of place. They were in South Australia and they really saw some similarities to it, maybe areas in the Rhineland. It's a bit warmer, might I add. but definitely some of the soil types and some of and the Adelaide Hills in particular. They still speak German in some of the towns there, so they were, I guess, a bit closer. Italians came. Italians are obviously incredible winemakers. Some of my favourite wines are Italian wine from northwest Italy in particular, Piedmont. But the Italians that came here mainly came here to grow fruit. So they came with, I guess, the desire to move to the Murrumbidgee irrigation area, planted large fruit farms and citrus and the like, and then got into viticulture. So huge scale, high irrigation ventures. Not a huge terroir interest there either. The French have never really looked at Australia, and so our family being French, France's viticulture is all about the sense of place. So if you've been there, you understand their appellation system. We've drunk French wine, you understand their appellation system. It's very restrictive, but it's also been developed over thousands of years of trial and error, what works best, what is the best vineyard, to the point where you can walk in Burgundy 50 metres and the quality or the price of the wine can be $10,000 versus $50. And so what they've actually built it on is they've understood that there are various characteristics that make great wine, and it's climate, it's temperature, and inland location or maritime location. It's a big one. Australia, we just talk about temperature, and they talk about soil. And so soil being the most important in Burgundy, if you look at a map, the planting is probably 500 metres wide by 60 kilometres long. It's very specific location. So it's not just climate, it's not just temperature, because otherwise the whole valley, every valley would be covered. But instead they picked that very minor zone, and within that, it's probably 50 metres wide is probably the best in some zones. And they've discovered that that's what created the best wine. So when we went to look, we decided if we wanted to replicate that, we went out to make French quality wine. Many people regard French wine as the best in the world. Definitely Burgundian background, we probably agree. So we like to think that maybe we're even a little bit better, but we'll see. And so we went looking for that similar conditions, location, temperature, soil. It's limestone generated. Look, I won't go into the complexity, but effectively limestone's yogurt for the soil. It improves the microbiome of the soil in the same way that yogurt improves your stomach. And so we focus very heavily on that. My parents took a big gamble and we found a new region, and I guess we did a Kevin Costner build it and they will come. I don't know if you've seen Field of Dreams, but we're the people who ploughed in the cornfield, so to speak, in a new region. So we've been very different the whole way through, and that's been, I guess, our starting proposition. It's not the reason for our general success, but it's given us the foundation to be successful. We make good wine. We make 16 wines, all of them in the top 10% of wine in the world. And Vivino, which is one of the few actual judgments that I actually listen to anymore, because it's drinkers rather than perceived experts making commentary on wine. And it's all due to the vineyard. So that's been the starting proposition. The rest is relationships to some extent. People gravitate to people who are passionate about what they do. And because we have this pursuit of our own place and our desire to I guess, discover in Australia an area that's very similar to Burgundy, it's attractive. It's people start paying more attention, it starts standing out in the crowd. You definitely have business-wise, a unique selling proposition becomes part of what you're doing, and that's been, I think, a fair amount of our success there. Winning the awards helps, but to be honest, greatest example is Oregon, the United States, very similar foundation story of the Lett family. They established a vineyard there, but it's very similar to Burgundy. They won second best Pinot Noir in the world to the French. But they said they didn't become really successful until the French actually planted vineyards right next door to them. So winning the awards isn't everything. It was actually getting out and convincing the people who, I guess, the mavens, if you've read The Tipping Point, the people who create the perceptions in our community of what is and is not a good product to own. So the sommeliers in particular, if you can convince them, then they convince their people in their restaurants to eat the wine, drink the food, drink the wine, and if you can convince them, then you're on the way. And then it's a compounding game. If you think of every sommelier talks to passionately about your product to 50 people a night. Hopefully 50 people a night, maybe 50 people a week, because he's talking about other products. But that then gets enough for them to then come up and see the cellar door and then taste more of the wine and go, wow. And then they go to another restaurant, they start talking, other sommeliers get into it. And that's been sort of our position. It's been very much a personal sales approach. So we've gone from there and we've leveraged up with similar relationships we've had into the hotel sector. We've been really lucky. We're one of the only boutiques, there's 2 boutiques allowed to sell to Accor hotels, so your Sofotels and your Novotels, your Pullmans, your Peppers, your Mantras. We're also Intercontinental approved. So that's been driven by some really strong personal relationships. So I guess be different, focus on quality, really important, and then focus on building the relationships. And that's been a launch pad, I guess. Still got a long way to go, might I add.
Thank you for sharing, Will. From knowing you and the relationship we have, I know how personal you are. You're a great person to chat to. You're a wealth of knowledge, and you're so passionate about what you do. And now to hear the underlying story of the foundation that you've built, that the whole family's built the business on, the story of Burgundy and almost replicating or finding something similar conditions in Australia, as using it as a foundation and taking that massive risk and giving it a go all the way to the journey where you guys are now, which is very impressive, to say the least.
Well, crazy. I think our family makes wine in the Yarra Valley, and they all thought we were nuts, because we're effectively where we are here at Rylstone. It's near Mudgee, Orange, Bathurst, but we're a long way from anyone else.
Yeah.
It's not the normal story. Yeah. So definitely crazy was their view of us. So maybe you need to be crazy too to be successful. That's probably, look at Elon Musk, it's probably a good idea. And
I've heard a few terms that you were sharing earlier, and something that I want to learn a bit more about as well. And I know that you focus on terroir-driven cultivation and winemaking and precision viticulture and sustainability. Those words, terroir and viticulture, are quite new to me, and maybe the audience as well. If you can help explain a little bit about it and your philosophy and focus on that.
Absolutely. Look, terroir, it's a French term. So I touched on it very briefly before when I was talking about the conditions we were looking for. So climate, so temperature, inland, or continental or maritime climate, soil. It's also cultural too. There's history, there's growing notes. We've got family in Burgundy, 400, 500 years of winemaking history. They've seen pretty much most vintages, though they are getting a little bit different these days. And it's the provenance, it's the actual location, bringing the wine right down into where it comes from. And to give you an idea, Burgundy was, I guess, a lot of the vineyards were established and run by the monks. They're called the Cistercian and Clunic monks. And for 600, 700 years, these guys were like really conservative, boring people. They didn't have much to do but tend these vines. And they were meticulous record keepers, and over that period of time, they recorded everything about these tiny, minute blocks, and they've identified from their work 1,400 different micro, they call climats in French, 1,400 different unique blocks, each with their own little terroir in Burgundy. So that half a kilometre wide by 60 kilometres long, there's 1,400 different individual zones, and each of them produces a different wine. So when we're talking about terroir driven, it's really about drilling down into the provenance of the location. Going back, I think, to that foundation story, and I think why terroir isn't so well discussed in Australia is the English, the Italians to some extent, the ones that established in Australia, weren't really thinking terroir. They're just keen to make wine, understandable. And so they tended to build big vineyards, big wineries, the Penfolds, your Lindemans, your Wynns, and they use hundreds of vineyards to produce their wine. There's not a single vineyard in that wine. It's a winemaker's dream. It's why winemakers in Australia are so well respected, is they've got to create a Bin 389. It's an iconic wine, not a Grange, but probably more affordable. And they use 100, 200 vineyards to make it. They've got to make it the same one every year in, year out, because they don't want to have to rearrange it with every restaurant in the world. And that takes a real skill. But it has no personality in terms of each year. The wine itself is a personality, but wine should have, think of it, the United Nations of Tara. Every vintage should have a different personality. That's the enjoyment of wine, is in France, it comes right down to the vineyard, and so they don't even actually have a term for winemaker in France. So they call themselves vignerons, so they identify by the vineyard. So terroir driven is creating your place. In wine production, it's very easy to lose terroir. So when you're blending vineyards, there's no terroir. So that's Australia, classically. In our sense, the terroir it's quite unique. Textures and flavours. Sometimes it can be special yeast that you use, and now we use a lot of native yeast or wild yeast in some sectors. And it speaks with a whisper, and it's very easily lost. Winemaking is a big hammer, and you beat the wine to shape. It's sort of the mentality here in Australia, whereas in France, it's wine whispers to you, you capture it, and you sort of gradually take it through the winemaking process, and you put it into a bottle. And you try not to do anything to it because you want it to represent what you have. And that's terroir driven in terms of and winemaking. So the winemaking it's not natural winemaking. Natural winemaking to me is a bit too gimmicky. It's low intervention. So you're trying not to adjust it. You've got this vineyard, it's perfect. Don't mess around with it. So that's very much our ethos. And we hope that, it means that some vintages are going to be different. It means that we're more responsive to our vintage conditions. Some vintages we don't make some wines. Some vintages we make other wines. We actually have had great wins and great losses because of this. We wouldn't have made our sweet wine, which won best wine in Australia, if we hadn't been responding to a vintage condition. So that's been part of it. So the precision viticulture, where it kicks into gear is the French labour was cheap when they planted these vineyards, and so the vine rows are really close. You can walk down them, but you can't take a tractor down them. And so they were able to plant, and they also don't need to be straight because you're walking. They can curve and wrap around things, because what they're doing is they're following, this is why it goes back to terroir, they're following the underlying geology of the soil. So they're following maybe the same soil horizon of some really shallow limestone, or there's a little bit more sand in this area here, or it was below a tree which caught a whole lot of the slope wash. So they were able to do that thanks to those Cistercian monks. They were able to get that level of knowledge. So they were able to get everything right down to the square metre. In Australia, labour has always been expensive. It's why agriculture in Australia has always been very technologically focused and advanced because of it. Because we had to rely on machinery. My great-great-grandfather on the side, they developed the combine harvester here in Australia. That's been the great story of Australia, is trying to replace cheap labour with technology. So in viticulture, we planted rows that were wide enough for tractors, long and straight, because, tractors, if you've ever been out there, especially when you're tired, you don't want to have a lot of turning going on because you'll probably barrel through a couple of vines. And so we haven't really, even here, we can't really follow the exact underlying geology. So we talk about our terroir still at a very much a vineyard or block level, or maybe even sub-block level, but we don't yet have a true understanding of exactly the metre by metre. So if you start at the row here, the soil might be 50 centimetres deep, but then it goes really deep in the middle of the row, then goes shallow again, and then goes deep again. And that creates variability in your grapes, maybe especially around ripeness. So, and then you go to harvest and you effectively just go across the whole lot, so you get an average of the conditions along that row. So even though the microgeology is doing this, your harvest like that, so your ripeness is also doing this above it. So you get average conditions. There are ways around it. If you hand harvest, you can get a bit more of specificity, I think that's the way to say it, to your geology, because you can skip vine. Well, that vine's not ready yet, but if the machine harvesting, that's not the case. So precision viticulture is now much more using, satellite to some extent, but much more drone capabilities of flying them over the vineyards, because most of being a vigneron is optical. It's taste as well, but it's optics. So, you can see when foliage is water stressed, you can see when grapes are ripe. You can look at the diseases, so you can actually teach that to robotics. And that's now, I guess, the next 5 to 10 years, we're going to be able to, we are starting to look at sending robots to not replace us, because we've got 100,000 vines out there. It's actually to assist us in identifying ripeness, and then what you do is you then feed that back into your Google Maps equivalent. You then program that into your machinery, and so then you can actually do things. So rather than going across the whole way, you go no, yes, no, as you're going through the row, and then you can come back and do the rest maybe 3 days later. So you get that precision. So you're able to really get back to what the French did. It's be a huge leap forward in viticultural quality in Australia. Once again, I guess we're one of the world's leaders. So they're quite amazing. The robots that they're looking at, they look like Mars rovers. And they have big cameras and they look around and constantly uploading. And the charts are amazing. You get heat maps and all sorts of things coming in. It's still very developmental. So that's sort of, they're both really combined with each other. So terroir and precision viticulture, really maximise it. I guess it's going to be the Australian solution, definitely our solution. Sustainability to us is obviously critical. Like, we're the custodians. My father started this here. My daughter's now coming in. Hopefully, she's 2 years old. She doesn't know that yet. I haven't told her that it's her future career. But the point is that wine vineyards are like planting trees. They take decades to become good. Our fruit is now good. The vines are 22 years of age. So we're planting vines now. We're expanding our vineyard. It's going to be great in maybe 5, maybe 10, maybe 20, maybe 40, maybe never years from now. And so those longer term, you've got to be really thinking about, you're always thinking about the future conditions. We're worried about the climate. Vines are definitely the canary in the coal mine. And if you want to understand climate change, go and get the vignerons to talk about what they're seeing about vintages. We're all seeing them earlier. Not hugely earlier, but earlier nevertheless, especially in Burgundy, they're seeing a couple of weeks earlier, which is quite horrifying. So we are all very cognizant of that. So you want to tread softly as much as we can. There's been various, I guess, with industrial agriculture in Australia, we've ignored the soil biomes, which I talked about. Limestone is yogurt for that biome. Vines where their stomach's on the outside. So we have our stomach and our gut flora's job is to digest food, and if it's out of whack, we're unhealthy. So vines, their guts on the outside with the root system, the cilia, and they rely on microorganisms to do the same thing, to digest all the trace elements and minerals and make them available. And it's certain, so if the soil is quite acidic, they don't do it very well. Limestone makes the soil alkaline or basic, so that's why it's advantageous to have limestone in your soil. But also if you're spraying it a lot, so if you're using a lot of harsh chemical sprays to wipe out some pest up in the foliage, you can get down into the soil and wipe out your gut. It's just like antibiotics. And then, so really trying to just cut back on a lot of those things. In terms of, so you're looking at trying to reduce, I guess, power usage as well. So fuel usage. So sustainability, it's to me, organics is lovely if you've got a tiny, tiny vineyard. I think, we've got to be cognizant that Australia relies on science as much as it relies on the environment. The solutions I see out that are going to get us through scientific as much as behavioural.
Yeah.
And so sustainability is that perfect blend between the two. Doing the right thing and then using science to even maybe improve on the right thing too. So we're seeing that moving to renewable energy. That's science in action. So organics would be like putting someone back on a treadmill.
Yeah,
I just don't agree with it. So that's it. So we're a member of sustainable wine growing in Australia. Big believer in it, and we've got to do better as well. As far as I'm concerned.
Absolutely. Wow, that was a lot to take in.
Sorry, Kevin.
Recapping in my head, I go, okay, wow. I love the parts that you mentioned about terroir whispers as opposed to like winemaking with hammering, and I think that softness shares with a lot of things in a lot of different industries, whether it's coffee making or food making. I feel like when you're when you come on rough, or if you're a bit aggressive with things, then the flavors change. But when you're gentle with things, the way it comes on is gentle as well. And I've been in industries that I've worked in terms of like coffee roasters, the way they apply heat and how they handle coffees from the farms to application to how you even make coffee or to how you steam milk. And just drawing on what I'm able to correlate it with. But in a very similar way. I feel like your Terroir philosophy just allows it to apply that gentle touch. And amazingly, it's combined with that precision viticulture. It makes absolute sense now that you've explained it. It's like, that's right. Why wouldn't you be tapping into where the soil is rich and where it'd be most viable? But it's not always, like you said, in Australia, labor is very expensive, and they want to just plow through with tractors and just get it over and done with as quick as they can, and the most efficient kind of system for them.
Yep.
But with technology that's coming, like you said, these Mars robot kind of things going around and measuring heat maps and all that, that's going to be really cool. That's going to be a game changer. That looks like it. And obviously,
well, that's your background as well, Kevin. So it's with engineering, and absolutely. So I'll get you out here to service it. It won't be a Formula One car, but it'll be. But it'll look cool. I'll paint it red for you.
It's got to be red.
It's got to be red.
Maybe a horse on it somewhere.
Done. Team Ferrari.
Yeah. And I loved how you use the analogy of a gut biome sustainability of the vineyards. I've never heard it that way, so thank you for sharing that. My level of understanding has just increased.
The thing is, wine is, a lot of this is important from, I guess, if you're making wine and if you want to appreciate how wine is made, but also wine is just to be enjoyed too. So and you don't have to have this level of knowledge to be appreciative of wine.
Yeah, talking about enjoying wine, let's get into some of the details of wine. And I'm fairly new to it. I mean, my mentors love it. Some of them are sommeliers, and they love pairing their food with wine. And time to time, when I go out to eat with them, I'm able to taste a bit here and there and learn with them. And they do this thing where they always swirl the alcohol at the beginning, and they watch the legs run down. Can you expand on that and what it means?
True. Okay. So, the wine. It's not wine snobbery sometimes, but no, there's actually good reasons for it. Is one, you're trying to oxidize the wine a little bit. So, wine flavor and smell are they're called phenolic compounds. They're volatile. They're perfume, effectively. So, when you have perfume in a bottle, you can't open it. If you open the lid, you can smell a little bit. If you grab it, you rub it really hard, you'll smell a lot of it. And interestingly, where you put it on your body, also if you put it on the top of your head, which is a cold spot, it smell as much as maybe on the side of your neck or on your wrist, which is a warm spot in your body. So it's really about activation of the volatile compounds, the perfume, the flavour. So the swirling around is part of that process. So activating, making those compounds easier to detect and be enjoyed as well, hopefully enjoyed. So yeah, the holding okay. Well, so I got a glass.
Okay, great.
Okay, and I got a bottle of wine, of course.
Beautiful.
So it's after midday, I believe. So so quite simple. So obviously wine, pretty simple. But if you tilt the glass or swirl it, whichever way you want to do it, so you can detect. From a scientific perspective, it's called viscosity. But in wine, if you swirl it around and tilt it again, either way, you'll see that it leaves like a residual, it takes time, or maybe not, to come down a glass. So you'll see that there's obviously a viscous solution's been left inside the glass. And the longer that starts to come down, so it starts coming down on droplets or tears or rivers, whichever way it is, tends to mean the higher the alcohol. So when you say a wine has great legs, you're saying it's really quite strong. So maybe you are not a great legs person if you don't like really strong wines, probably the best way to say it. So you're more a head person. But so you can just see them just starting to come down now. So that's taking quite a while. So this wine here is 13.7%. So it's quite a reasonably high alcohol one. We pick for flavoured alcohol, we're not commercial one. And so it takes a long time. So you're just starting to see these little rivers coming down around the sides of the glass. So that's all. That's just, the swirling is for activation. The wine legs is for alcohol detection. The reality is if these days, just get the one bottle. We have to put the alcohol percentage on it. But, it's nice to always know this stuff. It's good to show off your knowledge every now and then. So
Yeah,
That's who he's trying to impress.
acknowledge that they're going to impress on dates. Like, oh, look, this is
Look at this, great legs, great legs. And then you get slapped. It's like, no, I'm not looking at the table, I'm looking at my wine glass. So,
All right, so wine comes in, pour a glass, swirl it, look at their legs, whether it's great legs or not, it doesn't matter. It's just more of understanding. And like you said, swirling also brings out the aroma, the perfume, and you can smell it a bit better. And so now next is, look, I know that you're extremely passionate about this, and we're not going to do a 2-hour video, but in a nutshell, can you share how to correctly taste wine?
Well, the correct way to enjoy wine or taste wine, because the tasting wine, as you've said, can get in the way of enjoyment of wine. I've noticed that sometimes. So obviously, 3 main components of wine tasting. If you're going to be doing judging or you want to learn a little bit more, sometimes there are good visual taste perception cues that can teach you a little bit more about the wine. The quality in particular is a big one to learn about. Or maybe some of the winemaking tricks. So the first is just the look. So colour, intensity, check the viscosity, it's high alcohol. This is assuming that no one's giving you the wine label to read this yourself. And so that's fairly good. You can maybe sometimes tilt it up, you sometimes hold it up to a light so you can see it through. Sometimes you put it out, you tilt it and put your hand underneath it so you can get an understanding of how clear it is. Sometimes the clarity can be important because you can understand if the wine has been made filtered or unfiltered. A lot of these things are very technical terms. If you're really into it, Wessex does an amazing course, Wine Spirit Education Trust, just do a level 1 and get that level of knowledge. But you can still get an understanding of wines like. The next is obviously smell. So you don't have to have an incredibly long Gallic nose to do this. So it's just put your nostrils working into the side of the glass, and you're starting to look for bigger smells. Don't try and think, is that a hint of rosemary and thyme? I detect at the back. Focus on what's called primary smells. This is fruit smell. So yeah, great. It smells like grapes is probably not the answer here, but things like, say, Cabernet Sauvignon would be cherry or plum. So a big fruit-driven flavour. So that's from the grapes. And they're your primary. So if you're trying to blind taste, it actually can give you some cues, but that's enough. It's nice to detect some of those things, maybe talk about them. Then the secondary set is they're called secondary flavours, or what we call wine-making flavours. So wine-making influence flavours. So one is oxidative versus reductive. I will not go into that right now because that's just way too much information, but maybe yeast is a good one. It sounds bad, but when you're talking about champagne in particular, when you smell champagne, it smells maybe a bit like brioche or biscuit, maybe cheese rind. That's yeast. So effectively, what you're detecting there is that the wine has spent some time on lees, big winemaking term. All it is lees, there's dead yeast cells, they're protein. They can be used to soften up and maybe enrich a wine, in particular champagne. That's why secondary fermentation, which is producing the bubbles in champagne. The best champagnes in the world spend time on lees, and you see them when you go into the champagne cellars or Australian sparkling makers. We make them as well. Method traditionnel, as it's called, where they lay them along horizontally in big racks, and you see the guys going up and down riddling them, because what they're doing is they're trying to work the lees, the dead yeast through the wine. So that's just an indication, but not a big one. So the bigger one, though, is primary, and then probably the other big one is what's called tertiary, and these are relating to aging. So aging in oak in winemaking process. So the big one there is we toast our barrels, sealing them, very varying levels of toastiness. So white wine you might toast very lightly, red wine a bit more heavily. Toasting oak releases vanilla, so you'll get a vanilla hit on the nostrils, and that indicates the oak, or the lack of oak if it's not there. And then you have the other tertiary characteristics are actually from aging, so wine gets older. So that's where you get your tobacco and your old leather and nuts and things like that start coming through. They're quite nice and enjoyable, but as I said, you will have probably read the label and already know it's aged. So the third one is just general taste. So obviously there are ways of doing this. You've heard people, they're holding the palate and they breathe over the top and they make a big slurping noise. You can do that if you want. You can just drink it. Like normally you do that slurping, swirling thing because you're then going to spit it out because you're wine judging. The point of it is to get the wine all the way around the palate, front, side, back. You also get that by drinking the wine. So if you're like me, you're probably more likely to drink it. Don't need to do that slurping, blah, blah, blah. You just, maybe you can always move it around your mouth silently and gently and then drink it. You'll be able to detect pretty much the same things. So a little bit of oxygen sometimes can help, but it's not huge. So the big ones there is sweet dryness. So grapes, when they start their evolution from being a little nodule through to being a full-grown grape, so at the start of the journey, they're mainly acid, and by the end, they're mainly sugar. Big generalisation, but it works. So in some varieties, say sweet wine, botrytis, you use techniques. In this situation, there's concentration techniques, which is driven by botrytis. It's a mold that removes all the moisture and makes the grape almost into a cordial. The sugar is so high, yeast can't convert that into alcohol. So it leaves residual sugar left. That's what all it is. It's the sugar that the yeast just couldn't. The yeast maybe get only up to 15%. They then die off. You get the sweet. What's left is very sweet. That's sweet wine. It's called residual sugar. Maybe that's something to know. The other one's maybe acidity. So normally the tingle on the front tip of your palate is a good thing to look out for. What I tend to look out for though is that acid that we talked about right at the start of the process from grape going from acid to sugar and being harvested. Is that acid is called malic acid, and in a cool climate there's also tartaric, but in a cool climate, the ripeness doesn't complete. So there's a little bit of acid left, which is great because you want that because it's fruit-driven flavours. It gives it some sprightness to it. And malic acid is very fruity acid. There's a wine-making process where you can convert that fruity acid through to what's called a buttery acid. And you see that with a lot of Chardonnays. It happens in all reds, but not all whites. So when you see a lot of huge amount of butter in the wine, that's because that acid conversion is happening. It's called malolactic fermentation, or MLF, if you want to go and look it up. So that's probably something to look out for. The final one, obviously size, boldness, that's pretty obvious. But the other one is tannin. Tannins are like a cat's tongue or a bit of sandpaper, and it's just when it's in the wine, you notice it on the insides of your cheeks. It really dries it out. Really important structure and length. Also indicates that the wine can probably age. So wines to age well need to have really good acidity, malic acid in particular, and they need to have really good tannin. And two are effectively natural preservatives of wine, so they give it a 20, 30, 40 year bottle life. If they're lacking, both of them are lacking, that wine's probably going to be on there for a couple of years. So that's probably, so that there's really, there are these techniques. I'd suggest everyone does a Western course if they really want to know. You can also read the label. Nowadays, it tends to have it on it as well. So just back here, you go, look, it's bold and it's beautiful, it's lovely. Raspberries, great. And read that before you even go to dinner, before you order the wine. It can really show off. I even know the vintage 2016, it's great. So that, without making it too snobby, the most important thing is just enjoy it. So that's, I think, we'll probably talk about that in a little couple of minutes. So.
Yeah. With the wine, when you're talking about all the flavors and picking out the acidity and the different types of acidity and the sweetness and dryness, I think in terms of my preference, I really like cool climate Chardonnays. Mm-hmm. Yep. It's that, would you call it like a malic? Would that be a malic? Yeah.
Well, you can remove that, but yes, they would have a lot more acid left in the wine. So it gives it that crisp. It's crispness. Acidity gives crispness to it, so it's really crisp, really clean. Yeah. I don't like warm climate Chardonnay. I'm like you, but you can convert that out and make it into buttery Chardonnay still. But we try and limit that anyway.
Yeah, gotcha. Well, thank you for the quick 101 lesson. Definitely feel with a bit of practice, I feel like I can be a bit more of a...
Just read the wine labels. Just read
And quickly, what are some common misconceptions about wine do you think goes around a lot?
I think one is I guess touched on before, is expert knowledge. The listening to the views of the industry experts, the people that have been around a long time. Got to remember, wine is a very subjective industry. You know, I like milk chocolate. You may like dark chocolate. So I'm going to give everything with milk chocolate a better rating than dark chocolate, and vice versa. So experts are exactly what they are. So you just need to be a little bit careful. And I've sat at dinners with people who sat there and professed to the whole table that this is the best wine, and we all should agree with them, and how can we disagree with them? And it's not that industry at all. You tend to avoid those people like the plague, or you tend to just sort of smile and nod and don't tell them that you're actually in the wine industry yourself. So that's definitely something. It's to be enjoyed. It shouldn't be a chore. Don't try and force yourself to really get out there and experiment too much. Like, you know, start, if you're getting new into the game, start with a light wine and move up to bold. And that's the process. The number one social event to do in Japan in the 80s was going to what's called Beaujolais Nouveau, which is the release of very young wines from Beaujolais. They're very fruity, very light, no acid. Just really easy, almost sweet wines to drink. Now, 30, 40 years later, Japan is the number 2 market for Burgundy in the world, and to the point where it's actually scary how much knowledge they have. It's just, you start the process, and then you gradually get better, and you can get off that process along the way. You don't have to go all the way. So yeah, just take your time. I think the other one is I know we've talked a lot of terms. It's like GPs, you know, they don't say paracetamol, they don't say Panadol, they say paracetamol, and all the other drugs that. I guess we use terms to make us sound like it's more complicated than it actually is. Winemaking hasn't really changed for 3,000 years. You know, the Persians and the Greeks used to make wine very similar, almost actually very, very similar to how we're making, because we're going back to using clay amphoras and things like that. What's changed has been quality control. That's really it. Is we understand the chemistry. I remember chatting to one area in France, one of the wineries in France, and they said, 300 years before, when they didn't understand yeast before Lavoisier came along, that they used to throw a dead goat into the vat where fermentation didn't start. They could have just gone and got maybe some sourdough or something, I don't know, but that was their technique. So those things have been some improvement, but in reality, the process of fermentation is not new. It's not overly complicated. It happened by mistake in the early years. I'm more stunned with the people who took the risk to have something which was effectively rotten or sour. The other big one which I always laugh about is that it's a profitable industry. Wine is for, wine makes a lot of money. Vignerons would be great future husbands or future wives, might add. Women are definitely in the ascendant in the industry. No money. Wine is a money pit. It's a big one. And how do you make $1 million? You start with 10. It's a very difficult industry. It takes a long time. So it starts really complex. It's really competitive, and unless you're able to do something different, you're going to really struggle. And I think it's going to get harder. We've got Mother Nature against us these days as well. This year's been a particularly good one with fire, drought, then we had fire, and now we've got coronavirus. But that's part of our industry. So if you understand that, appreciate it, and doesn't scare you off, then maybe the industry is for you. Coming in expecting to make lots of money and sitting on the balcony drinking wine looking at vines is the last thing you're probably going to be doing. By the end of the day, you're normally like, I just need to go to sleep. I'm so tired. I've been up since 4 and I don't want to look at the vines. I want to look at some TV or something. I don't want to look at them. So that's probably enough. I guess
it's like a classic case of perception of a business owner. Where they're going to have this great space and you're going to enjoy it. And you're like, okay, become that, and you have no time for it.
Kevin, as a successful businessman yourself, it's like the misconception, you're self-employed, you must have all the spare time now. It's like, no, I actually work more. I don't shut down. I wake up at 1 a.m. stressing about something, and I get up and I go and do it and go back to bed, and then I'm finally get up and
Exactly. All right, moving on to more wines.
Yes.
Someone who goes out to a bottle shop and is looking for a wine, is there a sweet spot in terms of cost and value of wine?
Oh, wow. Look, This is really a difficult one. It's not that difficult, but if it's over $100, unless it's got a lot of age on it, you're paying for a lot of marketing. There is some provisos there. Like if you want to try a Burgundian wine, you want to have the best wine in the world, you're going to have to spend a lot of money for it. So there's a big experience premium you're paying for that. It's worth it in terms of the fact that if you love wine, but at what price does it not become worth it?
And just really quickly, Will,
Yeah.
you mentioned unless it has a lot of age in it, what is an example of a lot of age?
I don't know. Look, if a wine's over 5 years of age, you're starting to see some characteristics. Those tertiary characteristics we're talking about, those tobacco, leather, nuts. Sometimes some people don't want them. If you don't like them, don't age your wine. Wine is a living organism. It changes, it matures, or if you're a human, it goes in reverse to maturity. What's that? We become childish as we get older. Yep. That's definitely true. And so from the French perspective, yeah, great. Spend a lot of money if you've got it. Burgundian Pinots are the best in the world, but there's just not a lot of them. The price has gone berserk. Remember, Conti, I think they sold a bottle for $100,000, which is nuts. In the rest of our world, where the rest of us live, look, $30, 25 to 35 is a really good bottle of wine. 15 to 25 is a fine bottle of wine. Like if you're just sitting at home coughing, that's probably fine. Below that, you're starting to get, you're getting into really commercial wines. There's a lot of amendment undertaken on them, a lot of them. You might get more of a headache. There's not really a provenance, so there's not really a family behind them per se. They're normally either home brand, if they're bought from Dan Murphy's or the like. So personally, I recommend trying to get above that, but not everyone's budget's the same. Maybe drink a better wine and less of it if that's the problem. And so $15, 25, great for drinking in the home. $30. So this is retail price, so double them for restaurant price. You're getting to a really good bottle of wine. People are going to be expecting something which is actually, decent. It's boastable. Maybe it doesn't have to be a recognised label, but definitely something which is a story which is interesting. Then you get, I guess, above $50, $50 to $70 is top-notch wine. That's your wine where you're trying to ask your future father-in-law for his daughter's hand, take around a $70 bottle of wine. Don't take a $10 bottle of wine. Depends. Maybe you like Scotch, but definitely maybe take him something pretty special. That's that kind of wine. It's special occasion wine. Depends on people's budget. Everyone's budget shifts up if you've got a lot more money and shifts down if you don't. But at that level, you've got to be expecting something pretty special. And $100 is your iconic wine. So, and even there, you're starting to pay marketing. So there's a major supply-demand constraints in the best wines, because obviously if you're blending 100 vineyards or 200 vineyards together, your quality is not going to be as good as, hopefully, as a single vineyard variety. And single vineyard varieties have got maximum supply. So once that's dried up, the price starts going up. Places, I won't rattle off them off, but there are quite a few around where the price is taken off. And to be frank, it's great wine, but there are a lot of other wineries that are probably producing just as good product and could be a good alternative.
Great. Thanks for sharing that, Will. It's a lot more clarity, a lot more transparency in terms of looking for wine. So now look at a $30 bottle of wine over there. Oh, it's not. I can do with a $30 bottle of wine. And if they ask for that hand, I'll make sure I'll start to reach for that $70 to $100 bottle of wine.
So if you ring me up and say, well, what have you got around $70 to $100? I'll be like, Kevin.
Yes, it's time, Will. It's time.
It's time. Okay, got it.
We touched on this topic before, and I want to go back to it. And in Australia especially, it's been quite a challenge with the climate in terms of bushfires, drought, and to top it off, COVID coming in as well. And, generally it's not a topic I like to touch on for too much. I can't go talking about this without bringing it up for a moment. Could you shed some light on how you were navigating through these rough conditions?
Yeah, I think with all of us, with one all, it's not a nice creek. The reality of with wine, at least you can start with a premise that something's going to go wrong. Like we don't start with this year is going to be perfect. This year is like, oh God, what's going to go wrong this year? So you sort of start off with that level of anxious wrecks, to be honest. So like this year, I think, as I said, we had drought and it was like husbanding water, trying not to let it run out. And then, then the smoke comes in and fires, you're like, Christ, what else can we throw in? And then coronavirus comes in and you're like, Jesus, this year, I was about to say, what else could go wrong? And I'm like, well, frost is another one, which is a big issue for cold climate. And that's a couple of months away, so let's fingers crossed and touch whatever we have to heads. And you're supposed to touch your head because that's supposed to be wood. So, look, that you're starting with a premise. I think it's almost like you've got to be realistic about everything that you're doing. And if you start with that sense of realism, you want to be successful, but that's that. Steady, incremental goals, and sometimes you can do them in really quick succession, or they take a long period of time. But at least if you make it achievable, you're less likely to be a bit disappointed. Might be one point, but you're less exposed. So we've been obviously taking steps here to get through with drought. We've drought-proofed ourselves a fair amount. Bushfires not what you can do, though. We're a very minor part of a study which will resolve the outcome about the negative smoke-tainted issues that beset our industry at the moment. Much better half, Megan is helping project manage that, and that could really resolve a major issue, multi-billion-dollar issue around the world. In terms of coronavirus, I guess one of the things was when things are going south, you've got to act fast. I'm a big believer or disbeliever in what's called analysis paralysis. So things are going wrong. We need to take stock. We need to have work groups. Sometimes when you're a smaller business, you just got to take decisive action, and it might not always be the right action. That could be a danger in itself. But psychologically, with people around relying on you, with customers, is to be seen to be doing something has a large ability to assuage a lot of the fears and concerns, even being busy, to be honest. It's like what they say, when you're stressed, go for a jog. Like get busy, just go and do something. So the same with the business. So I guess just make sure if you're making a snap decision, it's not an expensive decision. So for us, we made some snap decisions we've never discounted, and we discounted aggressively straight away because we saw it would cause people to stay at home. And it was great. It got us some sales quick. We were in front of the market. A lot of other people we saw discounted in tiers. So if you're going to do something, don't sort of eke it out, death by a thousand cuts, go and hit hard and move out. And then we cancelled the discount very quickly after it. So did it, got sales, took it off so that didn't harm our brand. So they've been the techniques. We've got some big plans for next year. I think we're using this opportunity as a good reflection point. So I said, act fast at the start, try not to do anything physically hurts you. And then, I guess, be a bit introspective. These opportunities and crises give opportunity. And we're moving ahead aggressively with some big plans for next year. Really big plans, really expansion plans. One of the great things, but obviously a family story was we were involved with the establishment of a big tyre company, and it was built predominantly in the Great Depression. So it was, when everyone else was closing down, they were building it. They were building the factories and doing stuff. So that sort of underpins a little bit is if you're doing something, or do something. Try and, after you've made some quick decisions, then we're then analysing, now going, right, we're going to be more aggressive next year. Reality is, if it doesn't happen next year, it'll happen the year after. But at least we've got something to plan for. So psychological, to be honest, most of the damage at the moment, is psychological. Hopefully, if coronavirus is resolved, then it will stay majoritively that way for a lot of people. If not, then we're all in this boat together, and we'll have to act decisively and do something again then. Maybe another discount, but let's hope not.
Well, kudos to you, Will. You're obviously thinking about the future, and you're trying to future-proof it as well. And you're a man of quick action, that's for sure. Always on the bam, bam, bam. You get back to people really quickly. You're always on the ball. And I've got lots to learn from you, Will.
No, Kevin, likewise. Absolutely likewise. So you're one of the most relaxed people I know, no matter how much stress. Well, the relax isn't, you purvey that you're relaxed and sure, like a duck, underneath that the legs are going crazy, but you hold it together, which is great. It's a rock, which is great. People like to be around rocks. So,
thank you.
When the torrents are running. So.
And as we're coming to a close of our interview shortly, just a couple of quick questions I wanted to fire at you. For fun, okay. If Will de Beaurepaire was to teach a 10th grade class, what would the subject be?
Oh, what, like, should I be like a Mr. G or like Chris Lilly or I don't know. Oh, look, I guess life is a bit of a drama, but I've always loved history. I think that's really come across a lot. I think history, repeats, it rhymes, it's great for understanding cultures, it's great for understanding rationales and wine. And, so much wine is entwined with history, with wars. Sadly, the main wars, one of the wars between England and France were really relating to not just taking over the crown or who deserved which crown, but as also, for instance, Bordeaux was a huge part of England's tax revenues for a long period of time. And so they fought to take them, and French fought to get them back. And so that's always been interesting. The Basques I've always found fascinating, the oldest race in Europe. No one understands exactly where they come from because they're genetically and culturally and linguistically very different to the rest of Europe. They're incredible fishermen. They used to fish, I think, off Canada 3,000, 2,000 years ago, which is incredible, well before the Vikings. Their region, they make wine, and because they're big fishermen, acid, and so that they used to use salt to preserve the fish, and didn't have refrigeration. So the wine styles they have in those areas, which includes southwest France, is very acidic because that's in that match. So history, I always loved that connection, that connectivity. So,
what a great topic. Yeah, and there's so much you can learn from history. And as they say, history repeats itself as well. So always look for those patterns.
Absolutely.
Okay, any rituals for staying healthy while on the go, since you're always on the go? How do you stay looking as vibrant and as energetic as you?
Caffeine? Probably. It's interesting. I think, it's moments to slow down. I do love reading and chilling out, to be honest. There's a level, not all extroverts are extroverted all the time. Definitely, I think it's called ambivert. You have periods of running around, and there are periods of being quiet. I know you do your meditation, and I respect that. I wish I could really sit still long enough. It's probably because I've had too much caffeine. Lots of water, and I think, trying to have some fun along the way. Surrounding yourself with people who have fun tends to, you're influenced by the crowd you work in. As a new parent, the thing which I've always heard is no matter what you discipline your child, no matter what you tell them, their behaviour is set by the friends they choose, unfortunately, or the friends they end up with. And so, if you surround yourself with negative people, you're going to end up pretty down and depressed the whole time. I know it's always great to help people who are in negativity, but you also got to look after yourself. And so find some people to have fun with, go bowling or drink some wine maybe, or doesn't matter, just go and chat with them. So that's sort of, I stay healthy probably because I laugh a lot.
Joy, that's a big one.
Joy. Marie Kondo, does it bring joy into my life?
What are some of your favourite movies, documentaries, or books?
Jeez. Okay, so movies, Finding Neverland. I always loved, it's like a Dead Poet Society, Finding Neverland. The movie's got to move you, so to speak. But Finding Neverland I always loved was the story of John Barry, who wrote Peter Pan, and it was written as an adult play, not as a children's book. And it was really, the symbolism was all about the fact that, that we're a child inside, and that the ticking clock and the crocodile was, time is always chasing you. So it's phenomenal. I love that movie because it just brings out so many different thoughts and processes. It's a very sad movie, probably a sad movie too, but, it's, as I said, to be happy, you've got to understand sadness. So,
yeah.
I don't know, documentaries, interesting. Netflix recently. Probably if keeping it in the wine space, one of the most fascinating ones is one of those great stories where someone who could have done so much good didn't, unfortunately. It's Sour Grapes. I don't know if you've seen the story of Rudy Kurwan. He effectively defrauded wine collectors of about $40 million.
Wow.
But what he did, what's amazing is he was able to create wine that tasted like it was tens of thousands of dollars. You don't know how hard as winemakers you're trying to do that every day with your job, and this guy is just a bit of this and a bit of that, and I'll just mix them together, and hey presto, I can sell this at a wine auction for $40,000. Like, wow. I'd love to be able to sit with them and say, hey, mate, what was the secret? How did you do that? But the reality is yeah, he could have, with that, obviously his palate and his knowledge was so phenomenal. He could have, and he probably will. He's apparently being released from jail later this year. He probably will be poached by a big winery and say, right, now turn that force for good. It's a bit like, Catch Me If You Can. Remember, at the end, it's like, yeah, your job is now to get the frauds. I'd hope that he's probably more constructive, and a big winery out there says, hey, I want you to make a $10,000 bottle of wine for us to sell it for $50 or $70 to Kevin. So then I guess books. I read a lot of historical books. They're boring, apparently. I love them because it goes back to history. But I guess if I was picking something out else, I love Ian M. Banks. I don't know if you know Ian M. Banks. So,
no, familiar.
He's a science fiction writer, but he writes these stories about this group called The Culture. And it's about the culture, and the culture is far future humanity in well and truly into the years in the future. And effectively, we're now run by robot AI, and it's not dystopian there, it's utopian. And the AI has realised that it has no harm principles, and effectively its job is just to make everything perfect for humanity and to explore the universe. And these incredible AI minds around, and they've all got personalities, they're all quirky and individualistic. And it's just, I think these days where you watch Terminator and Skynet, and we're all going to end and die, it was sort of quite nice to sort of read something which is, well, maybe in 20,000 years from now, I can live as long as I want. Yeah. And these great robots will create anything that I want, and I can travel anywhere I want. Life is pretty good. So it's beyond scarcity. I think that's the reality. And I think that's the future we all hope for.
Yeah.
So that's probably, if I was to recommend, definitely read them. They're phenomenal. Unfortunately, the guy passed away.
Next, advice for your 30-year-old self, Will.
Oh God, I'm not 30 yet. So for my future self.
Advice for your 30-year-old future self, Will. So
yeah, true. It's like very Back to the Future here. I don't know. As I said before, it's positive relationships. I think that's the most important. So sadly, as I said, there's a lot of damaged people around, and there's definitely a saviour complex in all of us, and we love to, and you should try. I think there's definitely a necessity for charity. I've always been very positive on importance of charity, but around yourself, you've got to start make sure you're looked after. You can't help other people unless you're in a good spot.
Yeah.
Sometimes though, if damaged people can do uplifting together, and you see that with a lot of the therapy groups and the things like that too, but it's in a controlled environment where it doesn't become destructive. So definitely focus on positive relationships. So out with the bad, in with the good. I guess more time and self-development. I think especially we're told as we're getting older, when we're teenagers, we're going to be multi-millionaires, and then we hit our mid-20s and we aren't there yet. And that sense of pressure that I've got to work harder and I've got to do this, and I've got to do more of this, and just drives you forward. Next thing you know, you're 70 or something, is just a little bit more enjoying the simple pleasures. And a little less time worrying about the future and career stress. It tends to work out, but it also tends to work out in nothing like you envisaged. And that's where if you've got this big, bold plan and that's all you're targeting, unfortunately, my experience is that you very rarely hit that target. But God, you go on an amazing journey wherever you actually end up going if you spend the time to enjoy it. So that would be the advice.
Yeah. Wow. Some sage words there, Will.
Looking like the herb or the spice.
And finally, if you could only send one single line of SMS text to yourself 5 years ago, what would it be?
Drink more good wine.
Drink more good wine. I love it. Oh, well, this has been such an amazing conversation. You were insightful. I've learned so much. I'm sure the audience will learn so much as well.
Thanks,
I'm grateful and thankful that you imparted this with us. And I hope to collaborate and learn more and value. I really do value our relationship as well. Thank you, Will.
Mate, I value our friendship too, mate. You're a great person. I enjoy it. And this has been an absolute pleasure. So thank you for getting me on. I look forward to hopefully not looking too bad. I've definitely got a face for radio, so at the moment.
Also, before you head off, where can people reach or learn more about you and the Beaurepaire, please?
Correct. So the Beaurepaire wines, obviously, we've got a reasonably good online presence. Wine is an experiential product, so you can read only so much before you actually have to drink it. We are located at Rylstone, which is near Mudgee and Orange, so it's 3 hours from Sydney. Beautiful area of the world. It's done like old stone buildings. This building here was built by convicts in the 1840s. And lots of food now. It's a real foodie culture. There's a big arts community up here too. So come up, see us. Great restaurants and bars. Keep an eye out. So we're also pretty lucky. We've had some big support by some big brands out there too. So you're going to see us around. But come out, enjoy the surrounding Rylstone. The town of Rylstone itself is magical. So we've got a sort of blossoming community down there, and beautiful pub and some beautiful shops and some beautiful restaurants, and it's only going to get better in the next 10 years. So these days with remote work, bring your laptop out, tell your boss you'll be working from home, in inverted commas, and we can hook you into the Wi-Fi network out to sell it all on.
All right, well, I'm going to have to tell the staff that I'm going to be working from home and take my laptop and travel out to Rylstone, visit you, enjoy the wines and some amazing food out there. I can't wait.
Me too, mate. Like your place, I look forward to hosting you here. So thank you.
Again, thank you so much, Will. I appreciate it. Let's speak to you soon. Take care, my friend.
Thanks, Kevin. Pleasure.
Thanks for tuning in, everyone. I hope you enjoyed the show. All the links to the show notes will be available at kevinleesocial.com, spelled Kevinly. Conversely, if you have any interviews that you'd love to recommend, please send it over to kevinleesocial@gmail.com. I'd love to connect. Thank you. Until the next episode.